And the Georgia Bulldogs are on to the Super Regional Georgia, taking down Georgia Tech. It was 8-6 in 10 innings, a thriller at Foley Field. I'm Cody Chaffins, joined by Mike Griffith. Mike has had a front row seat to the action all weekend long there at Foley Field. Just got out of the press conference with those game-winning Dogs. What's your big takeaway, Mike?
Well, I mean, just poise and confidence, and Wes Johnson with some great coaching decisions, some tremendous individual efforts. I mean, I heard Jeff Dantzler, the color man for Georgia baseball, say this might have been the most amazing game played between Georgia and Georgia Tech in baseball. And I'll tell you, Cody, that just says volumes because this is a tremendous rivalry. And I know that Georgia tips their cap to Georgia Tech. There was some great sportsmanship on the other end. Some very positive comments from Georgia Tech about the Bulldogs and now their chances as they advance to the Super Regionals, where they will play NC State. We don't have a game time at the time of this taping. It'll be either Friday or Saturday in a best-of-3 series. Cody, kind of interesting, ironic, coincidental, whatever you want to call it. When the Dogs went to the World Series in 2008, they beat Georgia Tech in the regional in Athens, and then they beat NC State. So some things you start to wonder if this might just be meant to be. But I'll tell you what, Dogs had a big battle on their hand, trailed 5-2 after 2 innings, and really had to chip away at a determined Georgia Tech staff.
Yeah, as you said, Georgia's never, believe it or not, never swept a regional. So they did it the easy way. Although, like you said, it didn't feel real easy. Of course, in this weird kind of game, Georgia has to play visitor at their home park, even though they hadn't lost yet. So Georgia got up 2-0. Then Tech came back, took the lead, and it felt like Georgia was behind the whole rest of the day. Charlie Condon, chips one run away, but it really came down to the ninth where they finally get the game tied. And then, of course, great defensive play there in the bottom of the ninth, Marsh to Collins, which was just incredible play at first base. I mean, this game, you talked about the Georgia Tech history. You talk about, the 04 Super Regionals where Georgia beats Tech to move on to the College World Series. Like you said, 08, when Gordon Beckham and the boys beat them, then went on and played NC State, eventually losing in the College World Series final to Fresno State. But this game had everything you could ask for. Big players stepping up, veteran players, Corey Collins with a 2-out, 2-strike double to add a couple of insurance runs there in the ninth. I mean, it just had a little bit of everything throughout this game, especially in the late innings. There was a lot of drama.
Yeah, 4 hours and 7 minutes worth. I'll tell you what, and Foley was rocking. Or Wes Johnson saying this environment was as good as any he's ever been in the SEC. And think about that. This is a guy that coached at LSU the previous 2 years before Josh Brooks made the hire. And you look at 28 newcomers, Cody. You look at 18 transfers and 10 freshmen, and how do you put all that together? I mean, it's an absolute masterpiece for a team that was picked to finish 6th in the SEC East. They're a number 7 national seed, and they fight their way through this regional. That game with Army on Friday, unbelievable effort from the guys from West Point. I know there were a lot of really proud Americans, the way those young men from Army represented, and then the Army players sticking around to root on Georgia from Kudzu Hill. Pretty amazing. A nice win over a quality UNC Wilmington team. And then they glide in against the Tech team that really had to fight their way back. Remember, they lost 9-0 to Wilmington all the way through the losers bracket. Again, just a tremendous effort from the Yellow Jackets. You look at Charlie Condon, ho-hum, another 2-for-3 night where he draws 3 walks. I asked the Georgia Tech coach, how do you pitch this guy? He said, you don't pitch to him. That's what you do. Somewhat prolific appropriate that Charlie would get that final ground out and throw it to Corey Collins at first. Obviously, those have been the 2 superstars at the top of the lineup. You mentioned the home run in the top of the 9th inning. Colby Branch, I mean, this guy sets a record with 4 grand slams the night before. Then he comes up with a game-tying home run in the top of the 9th. This is batting out of the number 9 hole. That's how good the Georgia batting order is. You mentioned Condon chipping away. He kind of gets the rally started, that RBI single in the 5th. And then you see Trey, the young freshman, hits that home run in the top of the 8th. So it really was just, taking one bite of the elephant at a time. It was a really tough task to come back against Georgia Tech. Had they lost, they would have played tomorrow, and Georgia would have been the home team. I heard you mention they were the visitor. That's just the way the NCAA tournament brackets work. They would have flipped it if there was the if game tomorrow. As it was, Georgia wins this one in 10 innings, 8-6. And, hey, don't forget, Tech got a run there. In the bottom of the 10th, it wasn't over when Leighton Finley comes in. That was his first relief appearance of the year. So, I mean, Wes Johnson just pushing all the buttons and really a historic night for Georgia baseball.
Yeah, of course, like you said, Leighton Finley, normally the Friday night starter, their ace, who was a reliever last year, so he has relief experience. But you get into that postseason, and that's what you got to do. You got to bring a guy like that in. He'll get some rest, and then we'll see him, I'm sure, against NC State this weekend. And especially Leighton, after only making it 3 2/3 on Friday against Army, 81 pitches there, gave up the 5 runs or whatever it was. So I'm sure he wanted to kind of end on a better note, and he got a chance to redeem himself.
Yeah, and speaking of that, interesting that who they brought to the press conference. Charlie Condon was not here. And I think that Wes wanted to give Zach Harris that opportunity. Zach went 6 innings, kind of an unsung hero. When your starter can go 6 innings, now you look at the scoreboard and you say, well, he gave up 4 runs, right? 5 runs. Only 4 of them were earned. As Wes said, there were a couple of mistakes, but Zach stuck it out after that tough second inning and went 6. And that's a big deal because Georgia's pitching is what's suspect. There's not a lot of depth there. In fact, you wondered about late in the game when he brought Charlie Goldstein in the top of the 9th inning, the bottom of the 9th inning. Charlie Goldstein had not pitched since May 4th against Vanderbilt. Unfortunately, 3-2 pitch, it's a ball. He leaves the game injured. We don't know the extent of that. I think a lot of people were hoping Charlie could come back and provide some punch in the postseason coming off that arm injury. It appears he may have re-injured it. Wes did not give us an update, said it's going to be a couple days before they really know. But then you go to the bullpen, you see Chandler Marsh come in. I got to tell you, that's got to be one of the most amazing plays I've ever seen. Chandler Marsh comes in. Georgia's relievers have walked the bases full in a tie game in the bottom of the 9th inning, and Marsh comes out of the bullpen. 0 margin for error. He runs the count to 3-2. The Tech coaches are calling timeout, doing everything they can to distract him. The stadium, I mean, just the intensity of the moment was palpable. And Marsh on a 3-2 delivers a pitch. It's a chopper that pulls Corey Collins off of first base. Marsh has got to race over there and does his best Brock Bowers Matrix imitation with this sliding cover that's reviewed. Crowd roars as the call is upheld. The Dawgs escape the bottom of the 9th, and then lightning strikes in the top of the 10th. Fernando Gonzalez, with runners on first and second, lays down a beautiful sacrifice bunt. You don't see the Dawgs play small ball very often, but Fernando's a veteran. He lays it down, presses Tech. The third baseman throws errantly, pushes that go-ahead run across the plate, and you just kind of knew then it was going to be Georgia's night. Of course, Corey Collins follows with that 2-run double, and those insurance runs absolutely made a difference as Tech pressed back in the bottom of the 10th. This was a classic. I don't know if they're going to have this game on YouTube, if there's a way to watch it, but if you're a Georgia fan of any sport, you're going to want to watch this baseball game.
Yeah, you mentioned Jeff Dantzler. He made the comparison to the Brock Bowers play against Ohio State because it did feel that big, and who knows what happens down the line and if it will be that big. But I do think part of all of this is that it was against Georgia Tech, right? And the history that these teams, we talked about the NCAA history way in the past, but there's a lot of history just this season between these two teams. Of course, the rain out, game that got suspended back on March 1st. And I asked Wes Johnson about that this week. I said, is there bad blood there? He said, well, I don't talk to Danny Hall, but I don't talk to anybody. And he said, you don't want emotion because that can make you weak. So did you get the feeling afterward that it meant a little more because it was Tech?
Not really. I thought both of the teams were very respectful of one another. I was impressed with Coach Hall. He had nothing but great things to say about the Georgia lineup. He kind of previewed the NC State series. Tech swept NC State earlier this year. Now, he did say NC State had a pitcher with World Series experience, and that's probably who Georgia is going to see in that opening game of the best-of-3 Super Regional. Now, it's going to be right here in Athens. Big advantage for Georgia that they've got that super here, Cody. I believe it's about 70% of the teams historically that host Super Regionals usually go to the College World Series. But to answer your question, no. I mean, during the game, absolutely, you could feel it in the audience, in the stands, that these were two rival teams. But as far as how the game was played, I thought the sportsmanship was fine. I didn't sense anything other than fantastic playoff baseball. And in the postgame, both teams very complimentary of one another.
It's interesting because I feel like baseball is maybe basketball, but Georgia Tech, the rivalry is probably the hottest in baseball. So it's kind of fun to see. And, so many of these players all grew up playing against each other, right? A lot of Georgia players on both rosters. So I'm sure everybody knows everybody, and that leads to the respect. You talked about the Foley Field atmosphere, and we can wrap up with this, but I was watching on TV, listening on the radio all weekend long, and got to see, whether it was the football, Tate Ratledge and the football players standing on top of the House of Pain, cheering on the team, the folks up on Kudzu Hill in the greenhouse. Just talk about that atmosphere and what it's going to mean. I mean, it's going to be even crazy. It was already sold out this weekend. I'm sure Josh Brooks is looking ways where he can put some stands next weekend just to get more bodies in there, right?
Yeah, 3,745. You look forward to that stadium. I don't want to call it expansion. They're going to add some seats, though. Obviously, they're putting some money into baseball. It's long overdue. The Georgia baseball fans are unbelievable. They've been there all year long behind this team. And as you said, this environment, it was crazy. It's hard to believe there was only 3,745 in there. It felt like about 37,000, because let me tell you, these people were roaring and on their feet and absolutely impactful on the game. It made a difference for Georgia to be at home. Again, that's why you got to tip your cap. And I know it's not a popular notion on DawgNation with Georgia fans, but well, I'll tell you what, Georgia Tech really fought, really represented, and gave the Dogs all they wanted, made for a classic game. And of course, Georgia baseball all year long, Wes Johnson, with his positive thinking, has brought a different mindset, almost a bit of a swagger. I mean, Corey Collins was sitting up here with the game ball in his hand, was asked about it, and he said, I've taken one from every game, and I'm going to try to have one from every game till the World Series. I'm thinking, Corey, you hadn't won it. Yeah. But you know what? That's the mindset. And in baseball, that is so important, because more than 2/3 of the game is failure. You think about it, a guy hits 333 and he's an all-star. And so it's so important that Wes has taught these young men how to look at these at-bats. If you get out after a 7 or an 8 pitch at-bat, that's not failure. You battled. You pushed it to the limit. And so I think the way that Georgia baseball approaches this, I think the psychology of Wes Johnson is part of the genius. We know he's a pitching guru. We know he's got Major League Baseball experience. But I think the confidence that he's instilled, and to have guys like Charlie Condon and Corey Collins leading the charge with their confidence, I think it means everything. I think it's infectious throughout the dugout. Once again, got to remind everybody, the number 9 hitter hit a grand slam last night, and tonight hits the game-tying home run in the top of the 9th. And Charlie Condon said it. He said, that's the moral of the story. This baseball team has depth and confidence and players you can put in there. And tonight, Wes goes to the pen and uses 6 different guys. As we said, Leighton Finley had not pitched relief this season. He'd been a starter all year, had a rough start on Friday against Army. You look at Chandler Marsh coming in with no margin for error, bases loaded, tie game, nowhere to put anybody. 3-2 pitch. Not only does he deliver, but he makes an incredible defensive play at first base that I do believe will go down with Brock Bauer's matrix play if the Bulldogs can go to the World Series, which I'm pretty confident that they will. Matthew Hoskins goes out there. Here's a guy who's only pitched 3 innings with a 24 ERA, and Wes is putting the ball in his hand with nobody out and a runner on first base in a tie game in the 9th inning, and this kid goes in there, and he's able to get 2 outs. Granted, there was a couple of walks issued, but still, I mean, he had to provide just enough to be able to get to Chandler. Goldstein, would have been nice to see a healthy appearance from him. That's something we need to check on later. So to me, a lot of heroes tonight, a lot of poise from this Georgia baseball team, and Wes Johnson's masterpiece of a coaching job continues.
Yeah, and this is something, Mike, what I really appreciate is we're going to watch this week, especially on this Georgia beat, and there's going to be a bunch of people all talking Georgia baseball. You've been talking Georgia baseball all season long. You had Wes Johnson on your show months ago, right? So you've been on this the entire time, and that's why I appreciate about you is that, this is not just a fad for you. You're not jumping on the bandwagon now. So I want everybody out there, be sure you can check out Mike's stories from all weekend long, DawgNation.com. He'll have On the Beat coming up Monday night. You better believe we'll be talking some more Georgia baseball right there. But the next step for the Dogs is the Super Regional taking on NC State. Like we've said, it's a best 2 of 3, and we're not sure as of this taping if it will be a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or a Saturday, Sunday, Monday series. Winner of that advances on to the College World Series, a place Georgia has not been since finishing runner-up back in 2008. That's going to do it for our coverage here on this video. But like I said, we'll be all over Georgia baseball as we have been all season long. Mike, I appreciate your time, and we'll see you a little bit later on.
Look forward to it. Thank you.